So anyway, thank you for the opportunity, and Russ, thank you for that kind introduction. I really feel kind of bad every time Russ talks about me because I don't like that kind of, advocate, whatever, compliments. But I will say this. When people say things, I take it for granted and I don't really think about it. There's a guy running for president now, Ben Carson. I met him this past week. He's a nice guy. He's a neurosurgeon. And I think he and I were taking that test about the same time. Just so you know. You forget about things like that, and I hate to mention, but just before the people who were witness to this would die off, because one of them was still alive in Birmingham who told, I don't consider this as anything great. I consider it to be a humbling honor. And, when you go to get tested by a bunch of people who are very, very quiet, they're the leaders in the field, we actually sit down in front of them. There'll be 2 or 3 of them, and you'll be sitting there alone. And these people will ask you any question that they want to ask you. And trust me, the questions they ask you are intended for you not to know the answer so they can flunk you. And before you go in for the test, you're sitting with all these people who are waiting to take the test. Every one of them is a brain surgeon from somewhere in this country or the world. And when you walk in, you hear people speak, and some of them are from Harvard and Yale and Johns Hopkins and this. And I'm just a little old member of the Church of Christ from Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, my goose is cooked, I'm toast. I mean, all these guys are amazingly brilliant. So we do the test. I come out shaking. You're supposed to wait 6 weeks to find out if you passed or failed. But I couldn't come back home without knowing if I passed or failed. So I found a man who is a good man. He's still alive. He was one of the professors I had at UAB. In the hallway, and I said to him, look, I got to know how I did, because he was in the committee that decided, what happened. And he said, look, Swade, you know the rules. I can't tell you. You got to get it in the mail. I said, man, I can't survive 6 weeks of waiting. So he said, well, let's go behind this. Let's hide behind this, by this elevator. And I said, okay. He said, Swade, you passed, and you made the highest grade in the country. So at which point, my response was, Lord, I thank you. And so this was in the name of all those who have helped me along the way as I grew up in the Church of Christ, but many others. My response was one, gratitude and humility and appreciation. But it's not something I, thump my chest about. But just so you know the story behind that, that's how it came down. I cried, and he said another funny story. He said, look, when the professors gathered up the grades and announced this, I had spent a year in training in San Diego, California, and the chairman of that department at UCSD was in this decision-making, and he said, I trained Swade, and Griff Harsh from Alabama said, excuse me, no, he's a UAB guy, I trained him. So it's kind of like, who's going to be taking the credit for this? But anyway, it's those things that in life should humble you. And through all of this, I would say that my upbringing in the church has been an important part of my life. It's so important that, when we sang the first song, all of you should have known not to sing the second verse. Come on. We sing the first and last verse of almost every song. Have you ever heard the middle verse of any song? So there you go. Look, thanks for being here. I want to be instructive. I don't have a lot of time. I tend to get on tangents to make points, but I do not like to overburden people with too much information. I just want to be simplistic and helpful in you figuring out as this political season develops. When you hear politics discussed by these people running for president, I just want you to be educated and somewhat familiar with some of the things that they talk about so you can actually make sense of some of it, because some of it does get a bit complicated. I will say this. The next time I'm introduced at a church with my bio, I didn't know that was in there, and it's not. I'm going to ask that this thing about Republican and all that be taken out. And I'll tell you why. Because I have been reassessing my own life, and I'll do that about once a week. And I decided that I want to be a Christian first. And that's the most important qualification. I already have my passport and citizenship. I don't think I've done anything that they could take it away. So therefore, I want to speak freely and truthfully. And freely and truthfully, being a member of the kingdom of heaven and a follower of Jesus Christ, to me, is more important than following any political party, any one person who may mesmerize you with their whatever it is they're saying. And I even think that being a Christian and a member of the kingdom of God is more important than being an American citizen. I really believe that. And we get carried away with all of that. Sometimes we sort of leave our Christianity over here on the side while we get all worked up about a lot of things that we get worked up about. This past couple of weeks, we've gone through a family experience where my boys are for the first time separated in different schools. And one of my older boy, Christian, has gone to a new school. And it was traumatic. On his first day there, he's worried about a change. He hears about bullies and kids that are not nice to newcomers to a new school. And you know what? On the very first day, just about, he experienced that. And he came home and told me. Some kid just wanted to be aggressive and ugly to him, reached and took his binder where he had organized all his materials, and it's as if, why are you so ready and I don't even have my homework made? And wanted to hurt me and insult me. And so he came home and told me. So I said, Christian, do you know where the solar plexus is? It's right here. I said, son, the next time this guy does that tomorrow, take your fist. You know how Master Chung taught you how to punch? I said, without any warning, I want that fist to go to that solar plexus so fast that kid would know what hit him. If he says one more word, that's all. I played soccer, some of you know that. So I wouldn't use my fist. I generally use my leg if I was going to defend myself. My wife told Christian, on the other hand, that he should go and reach out to this boy and tell him that he wants no conflict with him, that he would like to be his friend. Christian, being a wise boy, took his mother's advice, went to school, and did exactly what she said, and the boy has become a friend of his. Now, you know what? You can complicate it all you want to, but it comes down to following the principles of Jesus Christ. That event made me reevaluate. And look, I would have gotten to the same conclusion given a couple of days and a cup of tea. But our human impulse is to hate it. And it's in that concept that I want to now move to this topic that's been announced about me speaking about the Middle East and kind of familiarize you, be simple and direct about what you should know when you hear things discussed. When we talk about the Middle East, you see on this map, it's basically this area that's outlined here. And when you hear about countries like Egypt, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. Those are the countries that now you hear a lot about, particularly Iran, Iraq, and Syria. That's what the discussion is about. They are part of the Middle East. So I want you to remember this picture. Now here's Spain, here's France, here's Portugal, here's Italy and Greece, which you may be more familiar with. Here's the Mediterranean Sea, and this is the Red Sea over here. And then you have India on the other side. So the Middle East is sort of stuck in the middle between the eastern part of Asia and then North Africa and the Western world. Next slide. Are you operating? Christy, did you mind me talking about your approach to resolving conflict? Thank you. All right. In color, this is sort of just a different way to depict this. Iran is a big country. Iraq next to it is big, but not as big. This is Saudi Arabia down here. It's what can be referred to as the desert of Arabia. Next slide. Now, I'm going to move really fast through this. Just when you hear in the Bible the fertile crescent, this is the area that covers. Back then, there were no borders. It was a massive land. So there were no specific countries. It was just one big massive land. And the fertile crescent that's mentioned in the Bible, where Abraham came from, is the area that's green because it's the only part of that world that's really fertile and can be cultivated. Next one. So now I want to talk to you very quickly about something that was going on in the early 600s. So now we're 2015. Jesus was in the year, let's call it 0 or 1. He was crucified in the year, let's say 30 or 33 AD. We could debate that. But then now 600 AD, which would be about 570 years later after Jesus was crucified, the Middle East that I showed you a little while ago in modern terms was like this. Look, you see this bluish purple area over here? All of that was then known as the Byzantine or Roman Empire. And it was a Christian inhabited part of the world. All the people who lived there were Christians. They followed Jesus Christ. Now, they were not Church of Christ type of Christians. They were not Baptist type of Christians. They were not evangelical or snake handling, whatever. They were just basic early Christians. And they lived and dominated in all of these areas. So it would be today's Turkey, today's Israel, today's Syria, today's Iraq and Iran. Excuse me, I'm not going to get there. Today's Syria and parts of Iraq and parts of Egypt and all across North Africa into Spain. This was the Byzantine Empire, which was a Christian Roman Empire. Back then, to the east of them was this yellow mass of land. This is Iran today and parts of Iraq and Syria also. That represented the Persian Empire. The Persians ruled there. And they were not Christians. They were called Sassanids, probably had some sort of Astrian religious leanings, but these were the two dominant empires of the world at that time in the 600 ADs. And these two fought each other constantly. Right up to about 638, they had ongoing battles between these Persians and these Romans, the Christians and the Persians who were Sassanids. They fought many battles, spent a lot of money and energy and effort trying to defeat each other, depleted their power and resources. Both became weaker because they fought against each other so many battles. And now, look down here to the south. This was known as Arabia. And Arabia back then was a desert land that no one could conquer. The Romans could not conquer it. The Persians could not conquer it. Alexander the Great before them could not conquer Arabia. He wanted to, but didn't. Because Arabia was very inhospitable. It was a desert. It was hot. It was difficult to live there. And the people who lived in that Arabia, let me tell you who they were. In simple terms, they were the Arabs. They were probably the descendants of Ishmael from the Bible. That's who lived in Arabia. And they lived and they belonged to different tribes. And these tribes, all of them, were pagan. They worshipped many little gods and deities. And these tribes all fought against each other. They were in constant battle. One of the tribes in Arabia, and I wish it would have shown down here in the south where Yemen is today, one of those tribes had become Christian. To make a long story short, a man arose in Arabia by the name of Muhammad, who now you know as the prophet of the Islamic religion. He says that he revealed, I will be respectful and say he received a revelation from God that he should teach this new form of religion called Islam. And he took this message of Islam, and to make a long story short, began to preach it and sell it to people in Arabia. And by the year 632, when he died, he had united all of Arabia under the banner of Islam. They all converted to this new religion, and they all began to be followers of Muhammad. So Muhammad united these people under the Islamic religion by the year 632. Now remember, just a few years earlier, these two powers existed, Persia and the Romans, and they were fighting each other all the time. By the time Muhammad united the tribes of Arabia together, they were very tired and exhausted, and they had paid no attention to what was going on down here in Arabia, where this new prophet was uniting his people under the banner of Islam, and where he had an idea that he wanted to convert all of the world to the religion of Islam. This was his vision. Go ahead, please. So now, I like this picture even better, because see, this was the Roman Empire, or Christian. This was the Persian Empire, Sassanid, and this was Arabia, where Islam began. Prophet died in 32. By then he had brought Islam to all of Arabia. Now I want to go through a few slides and keep mentally following what's happening here. Go ahead, Mark. So Islam began in this part of Saudi Arabia today. Some of you traveled there. I heard one of our girls just went to Bahrain just last week. She was going to teach. So there's Bahrain up in this area. But this is where Islam began, on the western side of Saudi Arabia against the Red Sea. Now, this is in 632 AD. When the Prophet Muhammad died, that's the area they controlled. Next one. By 638 AD, this Islamic religion under these tribes had spread to involve all of Arabia. And look, they had taken over Jerusalem and all of Palestine, parts of Egypt. This is the Sinai Desert that you hear so much about. They had taken it over. And they had taken over the country of Syria, which we hear about today, parts of Turkey, and all of Iraq, and part of Iran. So this religion and this army spread out and began to occupy many, many lands. Next one. We'll go rapidly. Then by 655 AD, just about, what, 20-some years later, look, they now control all of Iran, all of Afghanistan, part of Pakistan, up into the Kazakhstans and all the stands. I understand. I got it. And then they came in and began to spread west and occupy all of North Africa. And look, they even stuck across and began to occupy a part of southern Spain. Next slide. By 750 AD, less than 120 years after the Prophet died, the green represents the Islamic controlled areas of the world. Look at this. And now you know from the previous map that this includes all of the countries we talked about earlier, but a lot of Spain also, and all of North Africa. This new Islamic massive state was called the Caliphate. The Caliphate. The Caliphate means the inheritance of the Muslims in land. I'll tell you a funny thing. This part here, Spain and part of France, when occupied by the Muslims, they renamed it into Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus. Every time I drive through Andalusia, Alabama, going to the beach, I think of the Andalus, because that's what the Muslim Arabs call that country. Andalusia. Yeah, that's where that comes from. And you hear of the Moors, they speak about Moorish Spain. What is Moorish Spain? It is the Arabs who occupied Spain referred to themselves as the Moors, the Moorish Spaniards. And they took Spain over. And I'll tell you this very quickly. In 732, they wanted to expand more into Europe and take over France, but they were stopped finally in a battle, probably the first battle they lost in 120 years, because they were very powerful militarily. They were tough guys from the desert who rode their horses and came on horns and defeated any army that stood in their way. They destroyed, now you notice, they've destroyed and replaced the Persians and the Byzantine Romans. Very quickly, defeated both. But here in France, a French Catholic Christian leader of an army called Charles Martel finally fought a battle of Tours in France and stopped the Muslim advance into Europe. And that's how that invasion finally slowed down. Now, what you see here is the Arabs from Saudi Arabia who converted to Islam then began to spread and basically occupy the Persians, the Byzantines, even into Spain, called this the Caliphate, which is their inheritance, their land. So in their mind, God gave them all of this land. Now, the Islamic religion itself had some problems as soon as the Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632. The division among them was, all right, now we got this kingdom, who shall rule it? Who shall be the president, ruler, successor to the Prophet? They had a blood feud over this. Some people said it should be a relative of the Prophet that should become the leader. Others said, no, it could be anyone who is able and capable of carrying on based on merit. So they had this split. And this split became a bloody split. The cousin of the Prophet, Ali, wanted the job but couldn't get it. Listen to this carefully. The guy who got the job, his name was Abu Bakr. And he became the first Khalifa. Oh my goodness, you're kidding. He became the first Khalifa or successor to the Prophet and bypassed Ali, the relative of the Prophet. How can he do that? Even Billy Graham's got his son. Even Pat Robertson's got his son. Even Jay Fowler's got his son. You know, every preacher wants his son to become the next preacher, right? Well, maybe not everyone, but you know what I'm saying. So this was a deeply felt split. The people in Islam who wanted to follow Ali, the relative of the Prophet, became known as the Shiites, the Shia Islam. And the people who wanted to follow the other guy, Abu Bakr, became known as the Sunni Muslims. In the year 680, about 50 years after Muhammad died, the followers of Ali had one last chance. His grandson, the Prophet's grandson, Hussein, wanted to finally try to take over the kingdom, the caliphate. The Sunnis cut his head off and said, we're running the show. Today, the followers of Ali, the Shiites, live in Iran and the eastern part of Iraq, primarily. The ones who followed Abu Bakr, the other guy who finally did take over, lived in Saudi Arabia, most of Syria, Lebanon, even the Arabs in Palestine are Sunni in Israel today. All of Egypt, Libya, and all of this is Sunni. So the Sunnis are the majority. But the feud between Shia and Sunni is deeply felt, and it is a blood feud. It's a blood feud. So let me simplify and finish it quickly. This is a third of what I wanted to say, but forgive me. I'll do the best I can to kind of bring it together for you. Today, you hear of ISIS. ISIS. To put it in simple terms, ISIS wants the Islamic people to again live under this big mass of land and under the religion of Islam. That's what they want. They want to bring back the glory days of Islam under the caliphate. They've started where? In Iraq and Syria, so now they control a little bit of land in these two countries, but their desire is to spread out. That's what ISIS wants to do. ISIS means Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Right now they're in Iraq and Syria. That's what ISIS stands for. But they want to go much farther than that and reclaim the glory days of the caliphate. Now, in Iran, the Shiites are saying, no, we are the most powerful part of the Islamic world, the Shia Islam. It's like Catholic and Protestant in a way. And we want to take over. So Iran, right now, is working, and you hear about it every day, to get a nuclear weapon. What are they going to do with that nuclear weapon? Probably not fire it at anybody, but use it as a bargaining chip, use it as a way to get power so that they could sort of dictate their terms to the Sunnis in the Islamic world. The struggle in the Middle East today, in my estimation, is a struggle between the Shia, who want one day to take over the Islamic world like they should have to begin with, and the Sunnis who are still saying, no, you're not going to get leadership, we've got the leadership of Islam. So ISIS and Iran are fighting each other for control of the Middle East and of the Islamic religion. That's what this is about. When you hear all this talk about Iran wanting a nuclear weapon, what they're trying to say is say to the Saudis, we want to get our inheritance back. And the Saudis and the Syrians and all of these other Sunni countries are saying, oh no, you're not going to, we are going to continue to run Islam. So that's the struggle between, so if you ask me, what do you think about it? Well, here's what I think. And I want to close with this, and if you give me one extra minute, because I really wanted to do this, is I would say that as a Christian, what should we think about this? You know, it is hard to get in the middle of a blood feud that's been going on for 1,400 years. And as Christians, we have to follow the teachings of our Lord. And it's not popular. I don't think that people will really, may not even like what I have to say. But Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, and you could read it. You know what he said. He said, love your enemies. Pray for your enemies. When you suffer persecution, know that in the end, you will be victorious. And if somebody forces you to go a mile, go 2 miles. And if they slap you on one side, say, here, take the other side. And this is hard stuff. This is hard stuff. Because ISIS, I mean, what is everybody saying on TV? Are you going to go after ISIS? Yeah, Obama is just out of existence in the first week in the White House. And some Christians go, I like him. I like him. He's my man. Him a man. Other guy says, I'll drop a nuclear bomb. Like him, he's tough. Other guy goes, oh, don't forget about Iran over here. They want a nuclear weapon. We should take military action against Iran. Let's attack it. Well, hey, what's that going to do? Keep the feud going. We bomb you bomb us. We keep this little thing going. And here Jesus over here saying, hey, Christians, let me assure you that even in the face of hatred and persecution, in the end, we must look at all people as potential children of God and followers of Him. And we must pray for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the kingdom. I have had to read this, and I've had to say, I've been to 5 political speeches this past week. And maybe one of them should say, hey, they're fighting over things we will never deeply understand. The least we could do is step back, study it, figure it out, and then decide what we want to do about it. But not throw out red meat, so people who are ignorant are impressed with the way we pronounce caliphate, which is taught to us. Christians must take a different view of things. And we have to step back and be critical in our analysis of how we should view everybody. Now, if anybody has suffered at the hands of these ISIS, it's the Christians who live in the Middle East. They've been beheaded. Their heads have been cut off for their faith. But guess what? They wouldn't deny their faith. ISIS would put the sword and say, all right, deny your Christianity and I'll let you live. God's going, Lord Jesus, here I come. That is power. That is power. And there is power in always remembering that our first response to any threat we receive maybe should not be that we return fire. Maybe it should be that we pray for peace and resolution of conflict without having to resort to methods that our own Satan has encouraged us and told us not. It's a hard pill to swallow. But this past week, I learned that I need to swallow that. Because I was proven wrong in how I wanted to respond to my son's situation. And I urge you as Christians not to be taken in and become groupies with all these people preaching political stuff that may not even coincide with what our New Testament teaches us. And look, you may say this sounds a little not to my liking. I had to say this. Because when I read Matthew again, I kind of had to realize that Jesus was different than Muhammad. And Jesus was different than Moses. He was different than David. He was different than Joshua. And unless you come to grips with that simple realization, we will continue to happen. Thank you for listening.